Thank you for joining us. I'm Cheryl Martin. Our show today is part of an ongoing series of political viewpoints. Our guests today are Mr. Char-Lez Braden, Chairman of the Florida Libertarian Party, and Mr. Bill Faloon, co-founder of the Life Extension Foundation. They will share their thoughts on current issues following these messages.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and has grown to become the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 compared with how people die today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. Log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
Hello, my name is Dave. I am a face of ALS. I'm here at the Gardens Wellness Center. There's a couple reasons why we're here. Number one, we're seeking holistic treatment and acupuncture treatments to prepare me for stem cell therapy coming up.
My experience with Gardens Wellness Center has definitely been life-changing.
I love Gardens Wellness.
I love Gardens Wellness Center.
For more information or a free consultation, call us at 561-422-4330.
Rejuvenate your skin from the inside out and the outside in. With 98.6% naturally derived ingredients, you experience vibrant skin from day one. Introducing the Alavita Regenerating Trio, a moisturizing and anti-aging solution. These 3 innovative products reduce the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. Alavita, a beautiful merging of nature and science. Learn more online today.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful. A miracle, oh it was beautiful, magical. And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable. Oh, intellectual, cynical.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
With us now are CharLez Braden and Bill Faloon. It's a real pleasure and privilege to have you with us today. Bill, always a pleasure. So the Libertarian Party of Florida, you're the chairman, and it is renowned to be the 3rd most important party in the state. Other countries have multiple parties, like Israel, but here, thank God, there are that many. Please tell us about the Libertarian Party.
Okay, thank you. The Libertarian Party is primarily focused on your freedoms and getting government out of your life as much as possible, and what we call self-ownership. So you own yourself and the product of your labor and that sort of thing. And the government shouldn't really be taking that from you or inhibiting you from being the best you can do or can be. Often the government does things that are really counterproductive for people. And we believe that you should just be free to be yourself and live yourself as long as you're not hurting anybody else or impinging on their rights. And we champion those causes and try and find candidates who will move that forward into legislation.
There's so much talk about tax reform these days. What are your views on that?
Well, tax reform is a good step. We would prefer to reduce taxes and hopefully even eliminate them in many cases, probably in all cases. But that's not necessarily something you could do right away. So reforming taxes, just making them simpler and less onerous on individuals and businesses would be a really great step for all of us, economically and individually.
Bill, what would you like to add to that?
The reason that the Life Extension Foundation sponsors your show, Richard, is that we're seeing the adverse impact of excess federal government regulation, not only on the economy. I mean, the economy is being suffocated by a tax code that's crippling this country. We're also seeing scientists who are unable to initiate important research because there's so much bureaucracy involved right now in the basic healthcare system. Way too much bureaucracy.
There's so much discussion on these subjects and reducing the size of government. What are your thoughts, both of you, I'd like to ask on that?
Well, I'd like to see the current tax code of this country, which is 75,000 pages long. And accompanying that are all kinds of court decisions that further complicate what are 75,000 pages. We think that can be reduced to under 20 pages. Under 20 pages, government gets the exact same amount of revenue it's getting today. And this is life extension talking, not the Libertarian Party. But nonetheless, government gets the identical amount of revenue, but it's not so complex. We have statistical data showing that compliance with the current tax code is costing this country $1 trillion every single year. And to put that into context, the entire government, they spend about $3.2 trillion. About $3.2 trillion is what the federal government spends, but it's costing the economy $1 trillion to comply with the tax code.
The tax code is overly complicated, and there's two problems I have with, well, I have more than two, but two big problems with the tax code as we see it. The first one is the average citizen can't possibly understand it, and I believe that's intentional. And because of that, they must hire experts, and that creates this expert class that you have to go to get your taxes filed, or if you have a problem, to deal with the IRS on that problem. And so that's created this industry that has this inertia that wishes to protect itself. Most organizations do that. They want to protect themselves. And so we have to, as much as we want to reduce those things, we have to realize that when we do that, it's unlikely that we could just say 20 pages tomorrow. Because there's a multi-billion trillion dollar, I have no idea what the number is, built-in investment that the entire nation has on just filing tax work. And every company, I'm sure you have accountants who that's what they do, is they deal with tax codes both nationally and statewide. In a lot of places, I presume you have.
Well, Life Extension literally has an army of tax attorneys, and we sit down in a conference room trying to interpret the tax code, and they don't agree.
Yeah, they don't agree.
It's not just the average person can't understand it; the experts don't agree.
You know, they'll argue amongst themselves and then come back with some ruling, and you have to deal with it. And you talked about the courts; they get involved. So it's a morass of stuff, and you can't really be sure what your output's going to be when you feed it the documents that you must feed it. So you don't know what your liability is going to be, and it's super hard to run a business if you don't know what your liability is going to be. I presume you can back me up on that.
We know that probably 20% of our activities involve the bureaucracy involved in the tax code, another 10 to 20% dealing with FDA excess regulation. There's so much out there that trying to accomplish meaningful medical research that will lead to cures for today's killer diseases, it's not happening fast enough. And so much of it is excess bureaucracy, and the tax code is probably the best example that maybe everyone can understand, because they've all had their issues with trying to figure out how to fill out the new forms, because every year they change the forms. So you don't even know from one year to another how to do it. And then you try to read the instructions that the IRS tells you to explain the forms, and you don't understand those either. So it's way too complex. And the higher you go, the worse it gets, not better. Just because you can afford tax attorneys doesn't mean it's easy.
And part of that, I think, is very intentional. Congress, which is by and large responsible for this whole morass, is they are in the business of picking winners and losers. And a lot of the tax code is intentionally built to make barriers for companies to either get into a given market or to insulate those that are already there. And that's why they pick winners and losers. You see that a lot. Why does a certain company get a subsidy or whatever and others don't, or a certain industry get subsidies? And that's the government playing favorites. And they play favorites often based on who the lobbyists are up there doling out cash for campaigns and that sort of thing. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a complete payoff, but it's a payoff. And that's what they're really doing. And so they're using the tax code to enforce a certain level of skew on the market, because folks who might want to go into competition with you might have problems with that, and people you want to compete with, you have to deal with those barriers as well. And they're completely artificial man-made barriers. They're not technological barriers. They're not market barriers. They're a group of people far away who have another group of people with guns that will come and enforce what they said, whether it's reasonable or not, and whether anybody can even understand it or not. This is sort of a crazy way to live and to run a society.
Absolutely. And Bill, you've experienced...
I've experienced a lot, but it's part of the compliance cost is if you don't lobby Congress heavily to get your tax breaks, you're going to pay a big price. You're going to be paying the big taxes while the people who more effectively lobby pay the lower ones. And that is not the way to expand society for the better.
And it's not a mistake that a lot of, or maybe not an accident, that a lot of our big name companies have moved a lot of things offshore because they get to protect them that way and they don't have to deal with them as much that way in certain places. I mean, we've seen that happen. Offshoring is a real thing. And we could definitely jumpstart our entire economy and bring a lot of those research dollars and jobs back just by lowering those barriers. It's something we could do with a stroke of a pen.
We hear a lot about this right now, and there's alleged discrimination also with selective persecution of some companies and obstruction. Rather astonishing. We here on the Shalom Shan, of course, the Life Extension Foundation as well, cannot really take sides in the politics, and we are impartial and give opportunity for people on all sides to express views. We'll have Ted Deutsch on this show shortly. But I'd like to ask you what your view is with regard to the position of the other parties competing in Florida now.
When you say the other parties, I'll focus on the two main parties. The other third parties, I'll let them speak for themselves. But I think history shows, I don't really have to take a position as much as just so history shows that no matter who's in the White House and no matter who's running Congress, the tax code gets more complicated and more crazy. And these things you talked about and these things you talk about are multiplying and increasing. There are people who are, and companies that are targeted by both sides. To me, I often think of it as a team sport game in politics. There's the D team and the R team, and they always complain and they have their cheerleaders and everything, but it doesn't matter which side's actually winning. The same sort of thing keeps happening over and over and over. The tax code gets crazier and it gets harder to do business, and we see this over and over and over, going back as far as I can think in politics.
You know what the public probably does not yet understand is that even the charities in this country are faced with excessive regulations that is costing them the ability to fund medical research or fund their exempt activity. And this is going to get worse, where you're going to see charities spending an increasing percentage of the donations they take in just to comply with the tax code. Even though they don't owe any taxes, to remain tax exempt, they've got to hire so many accountants and lawyers to ensure they're doing everything right, that they're not performing their charitable mission. This is a real crime against humanity.
So a significant percentage of the revenues that are donated for good causes are expended on just defending the premise of their nonprofit status.
It's increasing. It started where it wasn't a significant percentage. It's now getting really bad, to the point where if you don't spend a lot of money on attorneys and really good accountants who understand tax-exempt law, you're going to lose your exempt status, and they're going to take all your money. They're literally going to shut your charity down because you didn't hire enough experts to figure out what is an impossible to ascertain tax code.
Has your party, the Libertarian Party, been subjected to such alleged abuse?
Directly, probably not. I can't say what might have happened far back in the past, but not recently. However, certainly all of our voters have been, and all of our members.
Please elaborate.
Well, just being a citizen in the U.S., they're going to fill out a tax form every year, and they're going to go through that process. And even if you're filling out the 1040EZ, you might not understand what you're looking at, and you could then have subsequent problems with penalties and interest on the penalties. And if you get really the attention of one of their enforcers, you're going to go through an audit, and if you really get in trouble, you're going to find yourself in a criminal situation. And the tax court is not lenient. It's not there on your side.
It sounds so very Orwellian. And on that note, we have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back following these messages. We're back with CharLez Braden and Bill Faloon. Whereas we must maintain an independent and impartial attitude with our show, welcoming people from different beliefs and views to be on our program, a question people would like to know is, what can the public do with regard to the issues that you're bringing up?
I believe the most important thing that they can do is get involved. Educate yourself, understand the problem, and get involved. Vote. Obviously, you need to vote. If you're not registered to vote, register, and I would, of course, say register Libertarian. But even if you're not going to register Libertarian, that doesn't stop you from supporting legislation that helps this problem, supporting candidates that help this problem. Become a candidate. We have this idea that candidates are somehow super people, and they have the best ideas, and they have the best staff, and they're the smartest, and I can guarantee you that is not true. A lot of the people who actually get elected are just very persistent in campaigning.
Well, our Life Extension Foundation, it was born on citizen activism. The FDA for many decades was trying to classify dietary supplements as prescription drugs. This was at the behest of the large pharmaceutical companies. They didn't want people just to be able to buy low-cost dietary supplements anywhere. They wanted to control it. And at one point, they had Congress willing to vote a law in the late 1970s that would have converted most of the dietary supplements people take every day into prescription-only medications. This would have jacked up the price, reduced the availability, and reduced the innovation that has occurred in the dietary supplement industry. So citizen activism, it works. We saw Congress go from a vote of like 500 to 1. It turned around within a number of months because there was a citizens' revolt against the idea of their supplements being taken away. So people should understand their voices really do count, that they can change the law for the better. But they got to let the public know, they got to let the Congress know that there's a problem and they want to see it fixed.
Give us some examples of some of these bannings by the government of, I believe, even almonds at some point.
Well, the government tries to suppress health claims on food. There's an article that I wrote in 2011 titled "The FDA Claims That Walnuts Are Illegal Drugs," and that was based on them threatening to shut down a walnut grower for posting the health benefits of walnuts on its website. And that particular article, it has been reprinted hundreds of times on various websites. And if you type in my last name, Faloon, and walnuts, right into Google, you can read these articles. They're sometimes reprints of what I wrote or people's own opinion on how absurd the FDA's position was in threatening to press criminal charges against a walnut grower for simply stating on its website the health benefits of walnuts. And walnuts, by the way, are very healthy. In 2011, there were 55 published studies that proved walnuts would reduce your risk of heart disease and cancer. There are now over 200 published studies validating the health benefits of walnuts. And yet the FDA didn't want the public to know that.
Absolutely amazing. What are your thoughts with regard to the electoral system in the United States?
The electoral system? In general, as just a system, I don't really have any problems with it, except there is one systemic issue that affects the LPF very directly, the Libertarian Party nationally very directly. And that is, because we have a winner-take-all system, there is no proportional representation of any kind. And that means that the two big parties are very entrenched because they always drive for the center and they divide the electorate, and one gets a tiny bit more than the other. Okay, so they're the king. Well, that doesn't leave anybody else any room to have any representation, which I think is kind of interesting for a country that was founded on no taxation without representation, because an awful lot of people are very instantly unrepresented at that winner-take-all concept. It is astonishing to me that something like 95% of Congress has returned their incumbents election after election, and yet the same electorate that votes those people in will tell you that they don't like Congress. They have like, what, 9 or 11% approval rating? It's
5%.
Is it down to 5?
As low as 5%.
Yeah. So if that few people like those people in Washington, how come they're still there? So there is an issue with that. And I don't think it's the systemic. It's not how we cast our ballots. It's not the fact that we have districts drawn the way they're drawn. There's something else going on there. And I know that is the very moment I find out what that is, I'm going to attack it and try and solve that problem, because these systemic problems are what perpetuate the IRS, the FDA, and those sort of things, where I'm pretty sure I know where they are, the prison business and that sort of thing. And the electorate still puts them back every election system. So that's where I think that if there's anything broken, it's the fact that we keep voting our guy back in.
And Bill, if I may ask you, what's your view on that?
Well, it is a huge problem where you have entrenched politicians who owe a lot of moneyed people, people who contribute to their campaigns. They owe them a lot of favors. And while they speak one way to the voters, they behave very differently in Congress. So it's a major issue. People seem to be afraid of change, even though we've seen change do a lot of good once it's enacted. And I'd hate to think that just a few people in the late 1970s, if they didn't lead the charge and incite the public to literally revolt against what Congress was going to do, that people would not have access to vitamin C, vitamin D, coenzyme Q10, nutrients that are documented in tens of thousands of studies to have disease-preventing benefits. And these are nutrients now you can buy anywhere, and the quality is relatively good anywhere. And yet the FDA was going to take that away from us if Congress had acted. So people need to get involved.
An issue and subject that's really very important to most people is Social Security. Bill, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've always thought it was inefficiently operated. But I've read more and more, and just a couple days ago, I got something in the mail. We're going to put this on the screen so the viewers can see, but it says that claiming benefits may sound easy. This is Social Security benefits. Claiming these benefits may sound easy, but you might be making a $100,000 mistake. There are so many complexities in just applying for Social Security. There are thousands of rules that dictate how much or how little you're going to wind up getting. So even that bureaucratic aspect of the government has got to be fixed. There's no reason why it has to be so complicated that making the wrong decision can cost you a fortune over the rest of your life. It shouldn't be that complicated. And yet people really should hire a professional before they go and apply for Social Security, because they may be making a very expensive mistake.
The fact that that exists at all tells you about the problem with government controlling pretty much anything. And Social Security, the concept of Social Security was very simple. Over your life, you'll put in money, and then when you get there, you've had an account. They keep an account. Remember, they used to send you your account. It would show up, and if you retired, you'd make this much and everything. Well, that was your money all along that you've been putting into your account. If I was a bank and I was holding your money, at the end of 40 years, you'd say, how much money do I have? And I'd better have a ledger that showed all your deposits and all your withdrawals that matches yours, and we'd agree, or otherwise there'd be a problem. You don't see that there. Why is that? Because it's not an actual retirement thing, which is what they've been selling it as. It's some sort, I like to use the phrase, Ponzi scheme, because they're really taking money from other people to pay you when you retire. Some people take offense to that, but oh well.
It's a huge unfunded liability that the federal government owes, and it doesn't affect people today, but it is going to affect younger people. And the problem is those younger people are going to revolt. They're going to say, I'm putting all this money in, and I know it's not going to be there. They're going to see benefits cut. Probably 10 to 12 years, benefits are going to start being cut, and that's going to create a huge issue. To us, that represents a fraud. You take money and you promise something and you don't give it out, well, you've committed a fraud. If you were an insurance company and you took in money for an annuity and you said, guess what, I spent it, it's not here, you would go to jail forever. It would be a lifetime sentence in prison, and yet when the government does it, people just sit back.
Yeah, the people who sold that fraud are dead.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be no accountability for those people.
A concern that is often expressed after we hear all of these controversial arguments over the future and what will happen with Social Security. In your view, what actually will happen? What do you see?
Well, I don't think the system will completely collapse, because there's too much political capital to be gained by perpetuating it. And what will happen, I believe, now remember, this is political crystal ball gazing, and sometimes the future is uncertain. It's not exactly sure. Will the system collapse? And the answer will be both in yes and no. It will continue to exist because it's got a huge systemic inertia in Washington and throughout the country. People have built their lives on that concept. So to just have it vanish would be something almost incomprehensible. 30 years from now, or even 10 years from now, when that begins to really happen, the political spectrum could be very different from what it is today.
Let me tell you a potential good outcome, and that is medical research enables human beings to be functional much longer than they're able to today. In other words, technology evolves to slow or maybe even reverse biological aging processes so that recipients of Social Security don't need to take it until they're 80 or 90. In other words, they're able to be functional and don't require retirement money. In that respect, there may be no Social Security dilemma. So technology could solve the problem. Life extension funds research aimed at slowing and reversing biological aging. If this research bears fruit, people will live longer and remain productive. So there is a potential solution.
Many people listening to this program today would be interested in learning more about your organization and, of course, yours, Bill. But go ahead, please, Char-Lez.
To learn more about Libertarian Party of Florida, pull out your favorite web browser, go to lpf.org, and that is our website and our window, and we'd love to talk to you.
Thank you. And Bill?
Well, anyone could type in life extension onto Google and find us, but it would be more humorous and interesting to type in my last name, Faloon. We'll put it on the screen there, Faloon and walnuts. Read how our government is trying to suppress our ability to disseminate truthful information. Read about that first, and then decide if you want to become part of Life Extension, because you'll read hundreds of comments about an article I wrote 6 years ago that is still making the rounds on the internet.
Faloon and walnuts, wonderful. Thank you so very much, a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dave. I am a face of ALS. I'm here at the Gardens Wellness Center. There's a couple reasons why we're here. Number one, we're seeking holistic treatment and acupuncture treatments to prepare me for stem cell therapy coming up.
My experience with Gardens Wellness Center has definitely been life-changing.
I love Gardens Wellness.
I love Gardens Wellness Center.
For more information or a free consultation, call us at 561-422-4330.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
This concludes our special show for today. Thank you for being with us. I'm Cheryl Martin.